This chapter is about cookies and how they're handled with JavaScript. But there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about cookies, so I wanted to spend some time talking about what cookies are and how they're used and what they can and cannot do. Cookies are used to save your web information on your computer so that websites have access to it without having to store it on their web server. But let's take a look at some cookies first to get an idea of what's going on. If you're running Firefox, you can go into Preferences. On the Mac, it's under the Firefox menu. And under the Privacy tab, you see a section called Cookies. You can set cookies to be accepted by default or not. You can set cookies to be kept until they expire, until you quit Firefox, or to ask you every time a website tries to save a cookie. If you choose the last one, you're going to get tired of doing that pretty darn fast, I can predict. If you set cookies to be off by default, you can also set exceptions so that certain sites will automatically do it and not ask you. You can also take a look at the cookies on your machine. This is a machine that hasn't been to a lot of sites yet, but you can see there's still a number of cookies from various sites. One of the things to note is that every cookie has a site attached to it. That means that only web servers from that domain can read those cookies. I cannot come along from Joe Blow's website and read the google.com cookie. On the other hand, even if I could, you can see what it looks like here down under content. It's only meaningful to somebody from Google. Let's take actually a look at this one. Its name is pref, which to me means it's probably storing some preferences. It has an ID. It has a TM, which may mean something like time marker. LM probably means something like location marker. And I don't even know what the rest of it is. You can just make some guesses, but you don't know. Domain means it can be read by any web server at google.com. So if you go to maps.google.com or gmail.google.com, any of those can read this cookie, but a different website cannot read a Google cookie. And it has an expiration date, which they've set fairly far off, more than 30 years in the future. Here's another cookie. If you've been following along, you may have a MapQuest.com cookie also. This one's called Location History. And you can see down here that it's actually got something readable. It has city, name of Healdsburg, which is what we were looking for earlier, which is in California. Healdsburg's in Sonoma County, and that's in the United States. So it's storing some information about the place name that I was searching for. And it makes sense to me that that's my information. I was searching for it. It should be staying on my machine. MapQuest doesn't have to keep it on their web servers. It can stay on my local machine just fine. And it only expires a couple years in the future. What cookies are not used for is also important. A cookie cannot go out and read information from your hard drive other than what's been stored by the website. It cannot be read by other sites. It cannot go and read your email address. Your email address may be in a cookie, but that's probably because you entered your email address at the website. And cookies cannot spread computer viruses unless you've deliberately gone to a site that put a virus inside a cookie. Just don't go to those kind of websites. So you can see here who has stored what data. One of the reasons that there are so many misconceptions about cookies, in my opinion, is because of the name cookie. Netscape first invented these in the mid-90s as a way to store your own personal information on your own computer. And back in the old Wild West days of the web, they thought it'd be fun to call it Magic Cookie, based on something from an old comic book. People who weren't as familiar with Netscape's sense of humor saw this thing on their hard drive that the web browser was looking at called Magic Cookie, and they thought it must be something spooky and dangerous. And they came up with all kinds of myths about what it was and what it might do. If Netscape had just called it Preferences in the first place, I think that a lot of this misinformation and misconceptions would have been avoided entirely. Because Preferences is really what it is. It's your information stored on your computer. And when you go back to the website, they can go and see that website can see your information. The one other thing I want to cover here is what's actually in a cookie, because we're about to write some cookies. If you have a single cookie from a site, it's just a string. You have a cookie name, which is set to a cookie value, as you saw over in Firefox. There's the word expires, and it's set to a particular GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, expiration date. There's a path, which is set to URL path, and we can go back here and you can see that for the most part, path is just a /, so it can be read by anywhere on that machine. And the domain is the domain that put the cookie on your machine. And that's all a cookie is a string that looks like this. If you have multiple cookies from a domain, it will look like one long string that looks kind of like this. The name of the first cookie, its value, expires and its expiration date, a path and whatever the path is, domain and its value. So for instance, if we have one cookie from our website, it could look like username equals Dory, expires equals, we'll pick some date far off in the future, 31 December 2010, path equals / and domain maybe .dory.com. And that's all it's going to be in the cookie. Then if we have multiple cookies, we get a semicolon, and maybe it has last visited, and last visited date could be 1 May 2008, and it could have the same expiration date, path, and domain. And this is all that's going to be in there is the cookie name, the value, expiration date, path, and the domain. And then that just gets read back by the web server when you go to that site. And JavaScript can access it also, both to save it and to read it. And now we're going to cover what's involved with that. In this exercise, we're going to look at creating a cookie based on user entering data into a form. On this page, there's just a simple single field where it's asking the user to enter a name. We're going to take in that data and store it as a cookie. If you're following along with the exercises, this is Chapter 9, Example 1, script.html. And as we just said, this is a simple form with a simple input field. All the action happens in the JavaScript, or it will as soon as we write it. So let's do that. Here's our skeleton of our page. Window.unload is going to call name field init, so we need to set up the name field init function. What name field init needs to do is try and read a cookie if it's there, and either way, write it out as soon as somebody enters something. So let's say we're going to set up a new variable called username, because that's what we're trying to get entered. If, you should always just enter the parens and the braces, and then go back and do it. Document.cookie. This is built into JavaScript. You can just look and see if document.cookie isn't equal to nothing, then you know you've got a cookie already. If there is one, we're going to assume it's the username that we've already stored out there, and say username is document.cookie.split on the equals, and then what comes back is an array, and we want it to be value 1, which is the second element in an array. If you recall, we looked before at what was in a cookie. If we have a single cookie, it looks like this. So when we're splitting on the equals, we're going to end up with the cookie name, username in this case, that's the name of the cookie, being in field 0, and the value of the cookie being in field 1 in the array. So splitting on the equal sign works if you know you're going to have only a single cookie. Go back here. So if there already is a cookie, we're going to grab it, and whether there is or isn't, we're going to say document.get element by ID, name field dot value equals username, because if there isn't a cookie with that name, it's going to be blank. And we're going to set the onBlur event handler to call our function we're going to write called setCookie. So now we need to write setCookie. So here's where we write our setCookie function. We create a new variable called expireDate to be a new date. This is built into JavaScript and gives us a new date that's today. And we're going to set expireDate to have a date 6 months in the future. So we do that. Just calling new date gives us today's date. So we're going to call setMonth, and we're going to set the month to be the current month of expireDate plus 6. And that automatically puts it 6 months in the future. If you're in November, JavaScript is smart enough not to put you in month 17. It's going to actually add 6 months and then subtract 12 months and add 1 to the year. Similarly, if you are on August 30th and you add 6 months, it's not going to set the expiration date to be February 30th. It'll set it equal to early March. Now, once we've done that, we want to grab the username from whatever the person has entered in the field. Document.getElement by ID. Name field dot value. That's whatever they've entered, because remember, we come in here because of the onBlur event handler being triggered. So there should be something in there. And now we set up our cookie. Document.cookie equals username, capital N, because we have to make it match exactly, plus username, plus semicolon, path equals / semicolon, expires equals. The path is so that it can be read by any web server at this domain and from any directory on this domain. The expiration date is now going to be expireDate.toGMT